My name is Johnny D. Nguyen. I am the founder of Viet Q Media. We are a platform that focuses on all things related to Viet Qs in entertainment, arts.
Welcome to the Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over the world. What triggered you to actually start an actual media company to do this?
What triggered me was I used to work in the media about a decade ago. I worked in the Vietnamese American media, and while there, I've experimented with content that was probably more closer to not only my age group, but also the subjects that I was interested in. But because it was a Vietnamese language-based network, anything that related to using English as my as the primary language, and doing content that was more for the younger was the minority. And I realized that in 2020, when I started kind of looking back into the media here in North America or in the US, it was pretty much the same. There were younger presenters or hosts that were doing talk shows and programs, but again, it wasn't content that I related to. So, and I started the search, and I was motivated to create Viet Q Media because I was looking for my passion, which is music. I was looking for musicians that did, lack of a better word, more westernized type of music, or more music that I would hear on top 40 radio. And I didn't, I through the usual channels, I couldn't find it. So I realized once I went through kind of different routes to find these Vietnamese artists, I increasingly just found the need to put them all in kind of put them all in a database or put them all in a category, and that kind of just snowballed into things even outside of music. So when I came up with the name Viet Q, that was the best way to kind of group all of this content together.
Yeah, that's I'm so glad that you didn't call it Viet Q Music, or identify one specific direction that you're going into, because leaving it open allows us to kind of really dip into this curated sort of place that we can come and consume a lot more than just the music.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately, I mean, I do have sub brands, but I decided to call it Viet Q Media because there wasn't any kind of media platform that was focusing on all things related to Viet Q. So I decided, why not do it?
A big fear of mine that I see with other communities of like the Japanese or the Chinese, once they've been acculturated in the United States or France or Germany, wherever their new country is, they sort of, 2 or 3 generations in, they don't really care about the origins or where they come from. And that's a natural human sort of progression, right? You have to adapt to your new culture, and your fusing of your mother culture and your new culture becomes sort of like the new third culture. And the work that you and I are doing, we're sort of showcasing what's happening right now. But I wonder, and I've wanted to ask you this, in 2 generations from where we are right now, are they really going to care anymore, or is it something that's going to be a complete, like, they'll look back on the work that we're doing and they're just going to be like, oh, okay, these guys were just right in the middle of transitioning into Americans or German?
Yeah, and I think that's actually because I was on that journey. In my early and most of my teens and 20s, assimilation meant everything to me because I was, I'm American born. um, my Vietnamese heritage or my Vietnamese identity was in front of me at home, but it was always in the form of just the food, and I kind of, or just my family. But I kind of took it for granted. I didn't look deeper besides just some of the other pop culture stuff, such as Paris by Night, when we have get-togethers and karaoke. That's to the extent of what Vietnamese was to me in my teens. But it was more so trying to, in junior high or high school, fitting in with my peers. I went to school with pretty diverse communities, and that was a really cool experience, unlike some of other Vietnamese that I've spoken to. But I kind of just cared more about fitting in, or kind of being more of the American, um, identifying more with my American side than anything. So it wasn't until actually when I started working for the media in my early 20s was when I realized that a lot of the things that I discovered while, let's say, for instance, doing interviews or speaking to community leaders, I had I couldn't relate because it was I couldn't relate to them because I maybe it was a language, there was a little bit of my language proficiency. I don't speak it or comprehend it to that level. But also it's just some of the mannerisms and the things that make Vietnamese being, some of our own stuff. So that made me kind of reflect and go, how much, how come I didn't really discover or are proud of my Vietnamese roots or my heritage? I mean, and how come I never really kind of dove deeper into my language? And I think I came to I don't know much about the history. I mean, I think one of the things about growing up, we all know, like, dark horse in the room, or is about the trauma that happened during 1975. The war, and what happened to, we know that it was tough for many hundreds of thousands of people that fled the country, but to the extent of like the details of it, and I know it's not uh, it's a heavy topic, but I people, the young people didn't, we don't know those details. And then also the older folks, they don't want to talk about it because it's both it's a painful conversation, showing back that memory. And for us, we, as kids, we don't really want to bring it up so that they're sad or depressed. So it's kind of that conversation that we don't know anything about. But I feel now in my later 30s, if I knew the extent of the 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 events and the personal trauma that they went through, I think that I would take my take my Vietnamese heritage, look at my Vietnamese heritage in a very different way, in a very proud way, because being a firstborn American, uh, here, like, we are very truly lucky to be in a country where we're able to go after what we, if what we truly are passionate about, and having this almost now, especially in the 20 now in 2021, having the ability to kind of operate from a place of abundance versus a place of scarcity,
Yeah.
which I know that was kind of what the refugees and the immigrant generation kind of had to go through.
Yeah, and I actually want to piggyback on that. What you're saying, the
Please.
scarcity and the abundance. M- the previous generation was just so busy making money to survive,
Making
right?
ends meet. Hmm.
They had to spend that first decade just crawling out of the hole of, like, financial ruin and just trying to get back on their feet. And I think that time that they spent kind of like clawing back out of the hole of having no money and barely getting by, they didn't have time to really ponder on what just happened. Like,
No, not at all.
yeah.
And also it's truly, I mean, when I'm hearing some of these events, because there's
Yeah.
programs now, or different people in the media. One to note is um, the the Vietnamese boat people podcast, where they go into these stories, and it's as painful as it is to hear it, it's healing for them to finally get it out.
Mm.
And that's what I feel personally, that I want to encourage that generation to speak about it now, because it is 40 plus years now, for the younger generation to really like appreciate that it, you know, the what they did when what they went through, and what they how much they had to hustle in order to put food on the table, and
Yeah.
and so forth.
I,
So
I also feel sometimes though that a lot of them came out of this generation where, like my parents' generation, they basically grew up throughout the entire time of war. They didn't I
yeah,
don't think that
yeah.
for my mom, I don't think that there was a time in her memory, cuz like starting in 1954, 1950, she was born, and coming out of like into existence into the world, there was war happening constantly. And she was 4 years old, and she left the north and went down to south, and there was this constant shelling and bombs going off and dying. And so I don't think in her memory there was never a period of peace.
You're
And
right.
so
Yep.
it was just sort of like the norm. And then, okay, let's pack up and go again. Second exodus, we leave, and then there's no thought and contemplation. There's no time to contemplate. So we're born, you and I, we're born into the world, and we sort of like exist for a long time without questioning, because nobody's talking about it. Everybody's just trying to go
Hmm.
through school and exist. And then now you and I are like at the point where we're like, okay, now we're gonna start. Where are we from? We're not from here. And then we go back to Vietnam. We're not from there.
We're
And
not from there too, and
none of
that's
this shit makes sense.
actually an interesting part, because actually I felt that it was a I've
Yeah.
been in Vietnam several times, almost every other year and so forth. My first time was in my teens, and it was a short period, but as I increasingly keep going back, and the country continuously and the country is very young, you and I both know that, and the as the country progresses, and kind of the more folks are in leadership, these younger folks are in leadership position, there's almost this the viewpoint of us as Viet Qs, we're just look, how would I even phrase it? It would be they they look at us in the West like we are just we're more American than we are Vietnamese,
I
because
agree.
and they're like, so when we go back there, they're like, are you here because you want to be here to learn more about your heritage? Are you here to kind of like
Pose your
take advantage of
bullshit.
us?
Yeah.
Are you
Bullshit.
doing anything to better
Yeah.
our
Existence.
identity
Yeah.
to the global world? So there's almost this, and speaking a little bit deeper to this, there are folks from the VQ community. They come back there, they kind of share, hey, I'm from the West. I got lots of money. I'm educated a certain way, and you know, you guys over here, we're better than you. They kind of have they bring that kind of arrogant kind of vibe, right? And that doesn't sit well with the with the local Vietnamese, because their economy is doing great, especially in these in these metropolitan cities, and the projection, the outlook of the country is pretty favorable in terms of its positioning there in Southeast Asia at the
Yeah.
moment.
If you go back to Vietnam with that attitude, you're gonna lose.
You're
It,
gonna lose. So
somebody
I,
hit my brother and I up a few weeks ago and asked, I'm a mayor, I'm gonna go back and I want to do some business, and I'm like, that's not really the right way to approach. You kind of have to like go back a few trips and really understand the people and become part of the
right.
community and integrate yourself into the cultural existence that's happening already. And you don't
Correct, and I
go
think
in and
there's
drop
actually a
money.
good how I share this with people with Vietnamese, whether in their 20s or 30s, is similar to certain religions, where almost every year it's a practice for them to go back to that religious city, for them to honor and observe and just kind of soak in
Mm-hmm.
their culture. And I feel with the Vietnamese, um, you don't really it, it's it's hard to put the words, but when you go into a country where everyone is of your heritage, it's going to make you reflect on yourself
Who you
and who you are. So from that, because and then from that point, you start asking your internal questions like, how much of this heritage do I really know? How why didn't I look into this further? How come, those are all, everyone has their own process, but I feel like I encourage every Viet Q living that was born outside of Vietnam, make the trip back. So that way you can kind of say, um, take take it all in, and then from there, you know, um, you'll do something about
Yeah,
it.
you can pivot from that information that you soak in after a few
Mhm.
trips and being part of that.
Yep.
So I have a completely random question that
Sure. Sure.
made me think. The earlier part of our conversation made me think of when you sort of do this curation and picking out music or whatever field, sports it could be, or anything in the
There's a
mainstream.
lot of things now, man.
A lot of
Yeah.
things, yeah, that I've seen that you do. What are you going? And here's the it's a tricky question. It's a fine line, I think, in when I look at you and what you have to kind of like go through. Do you curate for quality? Do you curate for quantity? Do you curate for a personal sort of angle that you're looking for? What is it that makes you sort of reach out to an artist and go, "Hey, I want you to be part of my movement"?
For phase one, it's quantity because when I started my journey with VQ, which was October of 2020, um, I was genuinely just curious to find as many as I could, because it wasn't. I had to go through a lot of different s- tactics or search strategies in order to uh, find these artists, because not all of them, when it comes to their, because we're talking about, let's go specific to music, not everyone will use their name in their identity, like their Vietnamese name in their identity, or their last name in their identity. They also have creative names. So it's like, it's not as simple of let's look up all the wins, let's look it up all the fams. So 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 I had to look deep into bios, which in some cases those aren't really SEO, search engine optimized. So I just had whenever I found kind of like a good a good group of people, like I find maybe 10 at a time, then I kind of go into like I'll use Spotify as an example. Like then they'll start suggesting me maybe someone that sounds similar, and then from there, I the more I kind of promoted that I am looking for all these artists, the more people were sending me
Wow.
referrals. Like, oh, I got somebody over here. Then I expanded it from the U.S., which was easier for me to find because I'm from here. Then I expanded my search to all the other Viet Q communities, Canada, Europe, and that's when things got really, really interesting. Because
Wow.
when I went to, for example, when I started doing searches in Europe, I found artists that just went by their Vietnamese first name and not last name, but they used the Vietnamese spelling of it. And when I asked them and reached out to them why, it's because that is the part that they know people are not going to be able to pronounce it, but they gives them the ability to kind of show their heritage in their artistry, right? Like I may not be putting that on my bio that I'm a Vietnamese Dutch or Vietnamese, but you see my name, you'll know to ask me what my heritage is. So I thought that was interesting as I kind of went deeper over to uh, the European side of things, and then went down to Australia, found a lot of great artists from down there as well, in terms of they and their sense of like they're really wanting to find a community, both a creative community but also a Vietnamese community, to kind of get that support. So it was uh, you know that's so I went with quantity first, but now I'm kind of moving and since then I'm actually over 200 plus now, which is, I think, it's a great number to share to everyone, because when I ask each of these individual artists, how many Vietnamese artists do you know outside of like V-pop or Paris by Night, right? As an example, they're like, maybe one or two. I'm like, how about 200? And then that's a conversation starter. It's and then I expand that into like all the different types of genres, music genres that we're in, and that blows people's minds. So
Yeah, your work on a very basic premise level is fascinating because you are actually uncovering and unearthing these artists that are otherwise kind of buried in the media landscape. Their actual cultural background is not apparent. But that brings me to another question here about why why would these artists not reveal their names? I mean, you know what? Why
Sure,
is
sure.
a very relative question, but uh, is it something that we should question? You know, I think that's my real uh, curiosity here is should we question as Vietnamese Americans, should we question the fact that these things are hidden, or should we applaud it and appreciate it? I mean, how should we think about these things?
That's actually a very good question. When I first, I can only I speak from when I discovered it. I'll start with this artist that he actually intentionally chose uh, a Japanese name for his artist name, which was just his name is Casey. And I guess in Japanese it was Keshi was a much more was the Japanese equivalent of it. And I think he did that so because he was looking at it from a character perspective and not his cultural identity. And and that's just what I gathered in terms of when he spoke about it in interviews. But it from a marketing standpoint, it worked because most people did not up until 2021 did not even know that he came from Vietnamese
Vietnamese.
heritage. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, um, it was his label, which is he's with Universal Music because they're marketing him more in the Vietnam market at the moment.
Oh wow.
Um, that they finally revealed that, hey, my name is Casey Leung. I'm from Texas, and I am actually Vietnamese. So that tidbit in terms of his marketing 2 years after the fact is now more known to the public. But prior to that, I think it was a fascinating um, for fans to kind of figure out like, is he Japanese? But he doesn't look Japanese. Is he Korean? Or there's no way he could be Vietnamese, you know?
Yeah.
So it was for whatever reason, it worked. Now that his identity, his heritage has been revealed, I am curious to ask him and also to talk to his team about look, what are you going to do about it now? Are you are you
Embracing it? Are you
embracing it? Are you reaching out to the community for support? Because you have fans. You have both in Vietnam. I read some of the comments. The fans were just they heard of his music before, and when they found out he was Vietnamese, yes, that did that did get them more committed to him as well. As a but
but
I
yeah,
feel there needs to
there's
go
that
deeper,
big
and I
that,
think
that there's that big but,
there's a
like
but because there was a part in the conversation, or he said like, well, it was a little bit, and I'm not picking on him, but I do want to ask him this: is expanding on that interview? He was like, "Oh, I can only speak up to a certain level. I can speak, I like he would say something like, I can address my ong noi, and I can maybe say some of the food, but that's all I can speak in Vietnamese." I feel that that's a more that's a defeated type of a response. Like he should say something like, "I I was limited in my Vietnamese, but I want to learn more, or I want to connect more." So I think it needs to what I encourage these younger artists in their 20s or even in their 30s is, you know, if don't let our language, and which is a big thing I'm challenging even myself this next 5 years. Don't let language be that kind of like I'm it's too late for me now to really learn it, um, be proud of it. Look at cultures like the Koreans are actually a very good example of that.
mhm,
A Korean American,
they're
most
hardcore.
majority of Korean Americans are very proud to speak Korean first.
Yep.
um, the Japanese Americans, that's a different conversation, but the Koreans are, and it's because I think there's this sense of pride they have in their heritage and their culture, and they come from the diaspora as well, and born and raised here in America or what have you, but their 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 attention to their language and their culture is
But
something to be very
there's
very
a
proud
few
of.
things that I want to hop in here. There's this ambiguity of not knowing that Keshi's Vietnamese, right? That needs to kind of be addressed. And
Sure.
this might not be the appropriate time to address it because he's on his way up, and we want to support that, right?
Yeah, and I have that, and I'm going to support him in terms of his musical journey because he is. There is no question from at least from in the American market right now, in the global market, he is the one that's paving the way. That comes from a Vietnamese heritage in the diaspora, so that there's no question about where he's headed.
He's in the leader of the pack
He's the
right now.
leader of the
The
pack.
pack.
Where if we're speaking about local Vietnamese, there's a few other names that I would mention, but that's a different
Vietnam.
movement.
Yeah.
We're talking about the a very prime example of a VQ is
And mainstream.
and
Mainstream
mainstream.
US.
Correct.
Well, here's the thing. I don't. There's no way that I would hold that against anybody because there's a history of that in the United States. All the Jews they changed their names, they anglified their names, and they took the Berg or the Stein out of their names to reflect a more mainstream. You go down the list of Jewish actors and singers and comedians throughout the history of Hollywood. They removed those names, right? So they anglified their
Right.
names. You go through rosters of all of these Latino, Latinx entertainers. They do the same thing. So having Keshi do the same thing, make it more ambiguous and make it more sort of like we don't know where he's from. He's just we could see that he's Asian and that's an Asian name, but we can't pinpoint the country of origin. So there's a history of all this stuff. I get that that's the tradition and maybe that's the marketing angle for it, but at what point do we have to draw the line and say, hey, we should not buy into this anymore, and we should. But it might be a struggle to go with Casey Leung. It's a
So
hard
from a
thing.
marketing standpoint, I think that yes, Keshi's gonna have the Keshi when he talked about that, he talked about it in almost like in a third person. It's a character, right? But now that he's kind of identified, he's revealed. It's like an actor. He's revealed that he is Casey Leung for the Vietnamese audience, me, you. Let's get to know Casey Leung and what is Casey Leung going to do about in terms of kind of he's going to get to a star power. A star, he's a star in the making. Is he going to continue on the path of I'm just I happen to be Vietnamese and and I do music and not really kind of go deeper within that, or is he gonna um do something and be like, okay, now I got the world watching. I'm making waves, and I'm gonna try to show other VQs or other Vietnamese that I'm going to make us proud. So and I think that in order for him to make that decision, again, what I said earlier in our talk, maybe he needs to make another trip back to Vietnam, where it's not a trip to go just see his Ong Noi or go see and just eat the food. Maybe he needs to
Hmm.
go to the city, go to Hue, go to like and go like, wow, this is what the country my family came from, or and maybe dive into that. And then when he comes back, let's see what kind of impact that makes. Maybe
Or getting into collabs. I mean, that's one way to really
well, yeah, musically, I think in terms of where he's headed, I agree. And business wise and marketing wise, I think that is 100% where he
100%.
needs to
Yeah,
be.
it's
I
got
think
to.
Universal Music, which is his major label that he's a part of, they have subsidiaries in Vietnam. For those who don't know, Vietnam has a representative office of all the major labels: Warner, Sony, Universal, Columbia. I mean, Def Jam. They're all
Wow.
there. So they didn't market him, like they introduced him just as of now as a Vietnamese heritage. But I know that their goal, at least in that part of the region, is let's do a one or two collabs with the
Hmm.
Vietnamese.
This is a great topic. It's such a fascinating topic that is also difficult to kind of talk about because on the one hand, we want to support, rising artists and stars and, in our community. But at the same time, we're just like, we can't stand for this repetition of whitewashing or in this case, it's not even whitewashing. It's kind of like, it's a
Yeah.
different thing. It's a different thing. It's now you're just an Asian, right? You're just a yellow.
You're an Asian, and
You're
I
an
think
Asian.
that, yeah, so that worked for him to this point, and I
Yeah.
think that from as an act, let's just use it like put him in the category of like an actor. That is the role and all that. But let's add more character to Keshi, the brand, right? The world knows now. The world knows that he is of Vietnamese heritage. Even though it's a Japanese name, he's of Vietnamese heritage. Let's expand on that. So I'm speaking now to Casey, the person behind it. Let's expand that, bro. Let's add let's add a few elements. And I'm not saying the language part of it, but let's just maybe add other folks that come from your same heritage
Well,
into your
we
music.
can get into the discussion of what it means to be of Korean Japanese descent as an artist, or what it means to be as a Vietnamese or a Laotian or Cambodian or a Thai, Southeast Asian name, right? I mean, there's these there's some implied maybe marketing sort of like uh, ideas behind naming yourself after Japanese. So if you had mentioned the Korean language, and Vietnamese or Korean Americans are very proud of,
Very proud.
very proud, and you even have so many Vietnamese kids that I know that speak Korean fluently. And that's some shit. They can't even speak Vietnamese, but they can speak Korean fluently.
Let's
What
even
the
go
fuck is
beyond
that
that.
all
Actually,
about?
no, even that's what I find amazing with the both two cultures, the Korean and the Japanese pop culture, because their fans are their supporters. They're not having to learn English to consume their entertainment.
Yeah,
They are actually going there looking trying to learn Korean to consume it. They're putting the English subtitles so they can follow along, but they're trying to not transcribe it to English. They're trying to speak it in
inside their
Korean.
language. Yeah.
And same thing with the Japanese. When you go to here in LA, when you go to an anime expo, um, these Americans are going there dressing and consuming the culture in the way that the Japanese do. So it's not so I applaud that in terms of what the both those countries have done in terms of bringing their entertainment to that kind of that level. And I would feel really proud one day that we as Vietnamese, not just as Vietnamese Americans, but as Vietnamese, um, we get to that where we go to a concert and we see or we go to any kind of show, and it's predominantly in Vietnamese, and it's all, and people are going there to consume it in its its natural way.
I've had this conversation with Chef Win Bui. He's like a really close friend of mine. He's been on the podcast, and we talk about this. It's like you have Korean and Japanese culture. They're so militant about practicing or diving into their the art, and they're just so one-minded, single-minded. They're just like attacking their craft so hard, and it becomes this sort of they produce these things that are tight and well thought out and well designed, and it comes with a heritage of a lineage of people and traditions that go sometimes hundreds of years, whether it's making knives or it's martial arts or whatever that they have. That produces these quality products that make followers come from the United States, from Europe, from all over the world. White people, Asian people, black people really become fans of like Korean products and Japanese products because they're just so well made and well thought out.
Right. The
Are we
craftsmanship.
missing that in our culture? And let's just
Yes.
really
I
talk about that, because it's
no
like
I
that's the elephant in the room, right? That's like we're missing that sort of
so
that.
no I do want to expand. So I what I because I'm in the creative arts, and one thing I found about our heritage that we had actually rich history of. So even to an American myself, we actually have quite a rich history in creative arts, right? Like wood carving, painting, all these different things. Like as a we're very creative,
Yes.
but everyone knows for the decades we've been just fighting, and it's not just what happened in 75. It's like we constantly are, you mentioned earlier very beautifully where like our parents, they grew up like in survival mode.
Yeah.
Grew up in it, and I can only imagine um that if I was put in that position, I wouldn't even be thinking about creators, bro. I would
No.
just be like, man, I gotta go hustle, man. I gotta go, I'm about to, things could happen any day now. So
And they
now
did
that,
happen any day.
and it
Bombs got
did,
dropped
and
on him. Yeah.
it literally did. So I think that as a as Vietnamese, as a community, and as a we we had to kind of put creatives to the side for a long time, and now I feel that things are kind of catching up. We're in a better place right now. We're able to kind of look back at some of the things that we do well, and so we're taking our time in terms of focusing on quality. So I think the shift now, and I think it's going to be for the next 10 years, we are starting to focus on quality and unique identity so we can share that with the world, right? So I'm seeing that in filmmaking. I'm seeing that in music. If, kind of a quick conversation about V-pop. If you look at V-pop right now, um, and why V-pop is beyond more popular than music that was created from the Viet music community, is because V-pop standards now are almost at the same level of K-pop. Like because the younger consumers, their choice is not American pop and and K. So for the consumers over there, the younger kids is like, I'm either going to listen to K-pop or I'm listening to V-pop. So it has to be on
One or
par,
the other. Yeah.
one or the other. Exactly. So these artists are like, oh man, I can't do a cheap video anymore. Or I can't look just like I'm just got out of bed, which I have to look very, I
The
have to
part.
look like a star,
Yeah.
So
Got to
I
play
think
the part.
quality is starting to really become emphasized. You know, uh, people in the art and the painting world, their skills are elevated. So I think that Vietnam a we Vietnamese, we're starting to really show what we're made of, and we're shifting from scarcity into like truly who we are.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love the fact that we're evolving and our community is growing and the creatives are getting stronger and more disciplined and fuck that attitude of "cái gì cũng được," We
Yeah,
we gotta we gotta take it up a few notches.
and then that's kind of something I'm starting to see shifted, because again, kind of here, even in the Viet Q community in Orange County, there's the ones that take the process of art more, uh, they're very prideful, and others are kind of like, let's just do it to make money. You know what I mean? And there's this always, um like actually that phrase you just said, I hear that all the time before. "Cái gì cũng được." Um
Không
just get it
sao đâu.
done.
Yeah.
Don't sao đâu.
Yeah.
No, they don't care. But when you have actually Vietnamese coming from Vietnam here and showing, no, that's not
No,
cool, man.
no. Mm-hmm.
You want to put out a music video or you want to put out a product, it has to be a quality. Then you can see almost the face like, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah.
I we just need to get invited to go sing. That's all that matters. We don't need to put, So it's excuse me, it's shifting, man. It's shifting right in front of us. And now that with me and curating and promoting original music coming from these young amazing artists, they're also looking at that like, holy crap, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is catching on, because the shift is happening, and I think people are taking a lot more pride in that. So uh I truly feel well, if we can encourage people of of our generation to kind of go back and discover their heritage, I think that the next 3 to 5 years, our conversation that we're having is actually going to be quite different. It's going to
Yeah.
be we're going to see probably a lot more of this movement of like everyone's, when Vietnamese get together. we may be speaking all Vietnamese with each other. You know what I mean? Just like, and I still see that till this day with Koreans. I go and I see them hang out with each other, and it's like, you know, they talk about it, right? Just like very much like the Latino and Spanish community.
Mm-hmm.
They very proud. They're not called a fob, or they're not called, which is a
Exactly.
out of date term. You know, it's a very out of date term, but like
Mm-hmm.
they're not called that because they speak that language, because the language, Spanish language, is looked as cool. It's romantic. It's because it is. It actually, I love the language. I actually sing and speak a bit of it. You know, because I was in a large community of it.
Yeah.
But I want kind of that same, where I'm talking to my boys, I'm talking to my friends, and we can talk Vietnamese and just be like it's a normal thing.
Absolutely. Let's shift the conversation to sports because that's
Sure,
something that I've been noticing on your
that's a big shift for me.
channel.
Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, huge shift, and I'm very curious about what's going on. What are the sort of the big things that are happening in that world? Because I am so disconnected from it. Because I wasn't raised in it, but that's not an excuse anymore, right? The I have to now start paying attention because I think it's important to pay attention to this. Several people have made it very clear to me that this is something that we need to be talking about.
So sports, music. What I've realized in promoting music, not everyone's into it, and to that deep of a level, right? But you're having parties and you're hanging out with your boys. You get into a sports conversation, guys go, guys and girls, and depending on, they can talk stats, man. They can go detail, so I feel like sports is a much more um im- important thing to cover from a media perspective, and because of that, it's it's more common than music, because a lot more people are passive about music, passive listeners. That's what we call it, right? They hear a cool song, but you go, do you remember the name of that artist? Not really, man. It's cool, man. That, I'm vibing, which is kind of where how music is viewed as, to
Yeah.
consume. It's just is atmospheric. It's just a vibe, right? But with sports, people get consumed with sports, basketball, football, and in Vietnam, soccer. All right, and to the rest of the world, actually, is soccer, right? So now, kind of, let's talk about representation. Um, representation in sports. There are a few sports that Vietnamese in the diaspora, Viet Qs, are starting to see representation in. One that's most that I'm following very closely is basketball. For the past couple of years, there's a family out in LA that has two amazing athletes, two sons that are making noise in the collegiate world, and one that's about to make history in the potentially being the first to get drafted
Mm.
into the NBA. You know, so so the uh, so with that being said, I find that we're at a very pivotal point in terms of, as parents are seeing these kids grow up and looking at looking at what they want to do when they get to their 20s. I feel that the prior to that, most parents would definitely say, don't look at music, don't look at sports, because there's nobody that looks like us that has made it, man. You know what I mean? We are in 2021. We are seeing a shift in that. So this young man, he plays for UCLA. His name is Johnny Giuseng, and he's 20 years old. But um, he is he's making an incredible run. He's having an incredible run um, in terms of his career, and is starting to and it's gotten so much noise that he has the interest of the NBA. Why I want to showcase that story is because in order for him to get to that level, he's 20 years old. His parents his parents had to sacrifice and maneuver and make decisions as a family so that he could be the best that he could,
Yep.
and not just do it part time, like going all in, because and so they did that. So so now he's in a position where I think most people that are in high school or in junior high, they're going to look at this and go, oh my God, like if I want to play basketball for a living, there is somebody that comes from my heritage and that's going to do it. There's also a young woman that was on your show recently that is also moving in that path. So as I kind of started to uncover just the game of basketball and some of the players coming from it, I'm looking at here in Orange County, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of young athletes in high school that are that are actually choosing that path. They're playing it and they're doing well. They're winning offensive player of the year, things like that. And they're starting to make that decision to go to college to potentially play basketball. So I think that it's important for me to cover these two very once in a lifetime stories, so that uh, these kids can start kind of really committing to um, choosing that as a legitimate pathway. Now expanding upon basketball, there are also um, we we all know Asians love martial arts and it's a great discipline and so forth. But in the world of mixed martial arts, there are quite a few MMA fighters that come from the Vietnamese heritage. There's some OGs, but there's also a new class all over the world, in Australia and Canada, America, and actually a girl in Switzerland as well, that is coming from the combat sport world. So as I'm kind of diving deeper into that, I'm not talking about five. I'm talking about at least 20 like
Johnny,
mixed martial artists.
I'm begging you now. Whenever you start to talk about these things, let's bring in some names, because I'm sitting here going, "Oh, I want to know about this." Talk about it and
Sure.
expose their names. Like, you talked about Miley Jones, and then
Miley
you talked
Jones,
about
we talked about. So earlier was Johnny Giuseng in terms of basketball, and
yeah.
his brother, who actually played for Harvard and went over to Vietnam to play for the professional league, the VBA. His name is Christian
Mm-hmm.
Giuseng, and I've interviewed him several times.
And
So
then
on the mixed martial
MMA.
arts side, on the MMA side, we have who's a legend now, at least into our community, Kung Le.
Yeah.
He's fought in all the professional promotions. There's also Martin Nguyen out of
Mhm.
Australia. There is
Ben Wings, also out of Australia,
just right, and then there's a couple of females. I'm actually covering this fight. Andy Wynn out of she's out of
South
somewhere,
Carolina.
she's in the East Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah, South Carolina is correct. And then she's fighting a Vietnamese Switzerland. She's from
Mhm.
Switzerland, and they're fighting July 31st, and that's very and I believe it's going to be on UFC Fight Pass.
Yeah, they're
So
fighting out of Italy. So
yeah,
it's
they're
so
fighting out of
exciting.
Italy, and so it's pretty cool. And then there's also B Win, where she has a fascinating story herself. She chose mixed martial arts because it was a form she needed to defend herself. She had something that happened to her, and instead of kind of dwelling in that, and she went all in terms of like, I'm going to never allow this to happen again. And she became her nickname is the Killer Bee, because
Hmm.
if you see her fight, she's relentless, man.
Yeah.
Whoever harassed her in before definitely would not be able to do that again to her.
And let's not forget, I don't, there's this recent America's Got Talent with the Taekwondo team, the
Oh my
demonstration.
God,
So,
that
yeah,
was
mind blown.
amazing.
Well, they just recently, got the golden buzzer, and I
Yep, yep.
was like looking at it. I was like, God, I wish somebody on that team was Vietnamese, because Taekwondo is traditionally a Korean sport. That's the birthplace of all of his. And I was like, God, I wish there was a Vietnamese person, or so that we can bring on my show.
Well,
And
there actually is, and I'm gonna bring this person on your show a little bit after
well, he they reached
later
out.
in the summer. Yeah.
They I don't know who reached out on your show, but this is why we're doing this, because you and I, and
Mhm.
let's put it out there. You and I have a responsibility to bring these names. I'm covering it in a way that is getting their whole life story. You're covering it in these like very contextual, their
Yep, yep.
sport, and I can't drill down to those kind of details because I just don't come from that world. But Long Wing is the team. He's sort of their spokesman for America's Got Talent. his girlfriend reached out and hit us up on Instagram or email, and he's Vietnamese, and they're brothers. There's three brothers that come from that Taekwondo. They're a family of Taekwondo guys, and I, I, I'm speechless when I think about the level that they're playing at, that they're training at. It's so beautiful to know that there's Vietnamese people in that kind of in that world
Oh,
at that level.
absolutely. And when it comes to martial arts, I mean, that's something that I'm just scratching the surface on, man.
Yeah.
I spoke more about just MMA, but if we're just talking about all disciplines of martial arts, there are a lot of families here in the States. There's probably families in Canada that really take it seriously and have probably competed at some high levels. You know, the one that I was mentioning earlier, that I was referring to earlier, he is martial arts and also from the stunts world, in Hollywood, and he is in the upcoming very important film for Marvel Studios called Shang-Chi, and he actually plays a mask, the mask villain,
Hmm.
and which is very important to this origin story for Shang-Chi, and he's of Vietnamese heritage. So it's something that I'm very proud to be a promoter in
Yeah.
of that project. But because Marvel and Disney are very protective of their characters, not just the actors, but their characters, because their fan base, I feel like there's K-pop fan base, but Marvel fan base are just as intense.
Yeah.
Their fan base, they
Fanatics.
have all these theories and speculations and such. So it's they're the identity of this actor I can't talk about until after the film comes out.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
But
Uh,
but he is a Viet Q, and he's amazing for him to get. I mean, look here, guys, a Marvel villain is Vietnamese. Like,
mhm.
I mean, an actor playing it, so it's not a Vietnamese character. But I think that's a big deal, man. In my opinion, I think that's a pretty cool
Huge.
deal.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
huge. I mean, and imagine the skill level that you have to be at to like
that's
be in
correct.
a movie like that. That's some world class shit, right? It's like
Exactly.
another level.
Hmm.
And so that's the debate of why sports is it's not a debate. It's a fact that sports is so important now. I'm beginning to learn this. Sports is so important for representation, right?
And also, I one other note is uh, football, American football. There's a couple of guys, but now kind of moving over to the biggest sport in the world, in my opinion, soccer. The Vietnam's national team, soccer team, is literally on so close to being able to qualify for the World Cup 2022. Now, that is going to be very fascinating on a lot of different levels, man. And why I'm extremely excited to talk about it, because being Vicky ourselves and being from the diaspora, um, it's when it comes down to, there's nothing more national pride than soccer, right? So when it comes time to World Cup 2022, if Vietnam is in it and
I
we're at
already
the
know what you're
coffee
gonna
shop here
ask.
in Little Saigon or in Garden Grove or San Jose, California, what is going to happen to these guys that are in those coffee shops or in those bars? Are they going to not cheer for the Vietnamese national team because of their viewpoints of a flag, or are they going to put that aside and look at the heritage and the nationality and root that on? So it's going to be, from somebody who is going to be in the middle of that, from a moderator and a speaker, I'm going to ask a million questions, and I know you are too. And what is it going to be, man? World Cup is a big deal. You love soccer and you love being Vietnamese. Are you going to root for them, or are you not going to root for them?
Yeah,
So
let's talk about that because I think that is such a worthy topic, and we're talking about it here. I brought it up in my show before with certain people, and now we're gonna have to talk about this because
we
now
have
is
to
like
talk about it. We
shit's
are
changing.
Shit's changing, exactly. So it's we're not there yet, but I mean, I just even Vietnam just finished amazing, amazing qualifier. And these young guys that are now bona fide stars in Vietnam. I mean,
It's exciting.
it's
It's so
exciting, man.
fucking
It's super
exciting.
exciting.
I
And these
remember
guys are,
when Koreatown shut down because Korea hit the World Cup, and it was pandemonium in Koreatown.
I
I
mean, this is
remember it.
history. This is history for us as as a community, right? So if we make it to the World Cup, the biggest stage of them all, what are we going to do as a community? And
Little
I think we're
Saigon's
going to
gonna turn the lights off and shut down, and what are we doing in OC, right? Like that.
right. So so it's you know I know we and I feel honestly 99% sure we're gonna do what we need to do. That team is an incredible team. They're gonna make it, and we're gonna for a year up until the World Cup. You and I are gonna be busy having these conversations.
This
We're
is a
gonna have these
good one.
conversations because it's soccer is a very national people are very proud about representing their heritage. There's nothing more than people are draped in their flags. People are speaking language. It in the country of Vietnam, it's gonna bring enemies and together. Like
Yeah.
everyone's gonna be brothers for that one game.
But Johnny, let's really
Sure.
talk about this, because I think this right here is the demarcation, the line where this is the point in our history, in our people's history, that's actually going to now turn it around with this
That's right.
conversation about the flag.
That's right.
Because are you going to get behind this flag or not? Because the rest of the world does not recognize anything but that flag, the red
Correct.
flag with the yellow star.
The World Cup is not going to put up two flags. The
No
FIFA
way.
organization, they're not going to put up two flags when it comes to that nation. It's the same thing with the Laotian flag as well. Like
Yeah.
they got
Who's
what are we
covering
going to
this
do?
shit? Like NBC? Are they going to put up two flags or one flag? Right? It's
Are they going to refer to it? And this hurts, but are they going to refer to the city of they're not going to say the word Saigon on TV because it's
it's
not
not right. It's not in
recognized.
the right. But then here, get this shit. Here's another comparison that really hurts too. I mean, it has to hurt. We come from the we are the Confederate soldiers'
Hmm.
kids.
That's right.
There's an X that flies in the South of the Confederate flag. That's the losing side, right? That's not the stars and stripes that we see today.
That's right.
And it's such a painful acknowledgement that our three red stripes is this, and we come from that. That's
That's
our
right.
families. Those are our families.
Well, most of us here in North America, yes.
Yes,
The when I
most of us
speak
here.
to when I speak to the Europeans, it is a very European Vietnamese. It's a different
It's a
conversation.
different conversation. It's a totally different conversation.
It's a very
There's
different
a
conversation.
there's a very different conversation with especially Parisian Vietnamese that come from families of the 50s. It's a totally different animal
Oh,
too.
this is a non-issue. So they're gonna be it'll
But
be a fine World Cup.
yeah, and it's like, I hope that right now, like this point in time that we're marking right now, this conversation, I wonder how many other Vietnamese Americans are talking about it. I think you and I are the first ones who are actually like, now I'm going to start beating the drums of this conversation. This flag conversation is important because, look, I come from the side that had to flee. I come from the side that is not in the majority. Me, you, and a lot of us Vietnamese American kids are the product of a different flag. And
That's
it's
right.
just like, uh, so wait, when we go to the World Cup, are we left out now? And you might, people who are against the star flag might be like, you guys are they don't look at us that way. They don't look at us like as different. We're all Vietnamese. So
Correct.
what are
Let's talk about it from that point of view. Is like, come join us, man. We actually want you
yeah.
to be with us. We're not talking about a government focused type of conversation. We're just talking like us as a nationality. Like we, we always view you as a Vietnamese. Let's not put something like divide us, and let's just drill it down to the people. And let's
But
not talk
now
about politics or whatever.
is it our previous generation, our parents' generation that are giving us the pressure and making us think a certain way, or are we free to finally break free of the chains that bind us to think a certain way? Right? Are we now strong enough as adults, men and women, to make our own decisions and say, "Hey, This is time for unification worldwide to make sure that we get the representation as a country, not as some factions of a country. And I can't even believe I'm saying these words. That's 20 years ago. These were, I could not utter this kind of thinking, right? But now I'm questioning it. Like, where do we stand now? Mom and dad, parents, uncles, aunts. Like, where are we in the conversation? And I would love to hear what the older generation says, because I want to do it respectfully, and I want to do it
At the end of the day,
with love.
exactly. It's when we're speaking hard truth and we're doing it from a place of love, it's going to be, there's how the other person will take it. It's that you can't control. But I think but not addressing the elephant in the room is, we're going to continue down this path for until that generation passed. But there are still going to be residuals from the generation like you and I, who the kids will not dare ever to think for, not think for themselves, but like, yeah, I mean, yeah, essentially like making their own assessment, because, but I think that's due to influence from their family and respect for their family, but not also knowing truly the changes that has happened in
Mm-hmm.
for the country and the people. A lot of the folks that are there now, they honestly didn't grow. They didn't. A large portion of the younger kids right now, they didn't grow up during the war or having to deal with that, right? So we can't completely put them in a bucket and say like, we don't align with your viewpoints because you were born in Vietnam. That's not fair.
No, not at all.
That's not
Well,
fair. So
what are we
but over here on
afraid
the
of?
States side,
What are we afraid of? What are guys like you and I really afraid of when we see the flag? That
sure.
red flag with the yellow star?
No,
What are
for
we truly thinking of in our mind?
I I'm about diploma. Like I'm about diplomacy right now, which is like trying to, my responsibility in the media, or working in the media currently, is I want to have as many of these conversations so that we can respectfully let us over here, the people that went through all that, heal and be able to start opening, looking at, start unpacking so that they can start, not look at the current Vietnam, um, and put everybody in, and put everybody together and group everybody together because of what happened in the past, right? Um, and I feel that what I'm afraid of is, as soon as I say an opinion, that conversation is going to be shut. And I think we experienced that even in the 2020 election with, in America, with the recent with
Yeah.
between Trump and Biden, where Trump supporters, why they were so effective, and more so than the Biden supporters, were Trump supporters were true believers in everything that he was, and they would not even hear an opposing view, like, whatever way you throw at it, it's like, you don't know what you're talking about. That's the response. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And even if you're throwing factual stuff, and you can, these people's beliefs, the Trump supporters' beliefs were so strong that no matter what you said, you could not change their mind. And I
Well,
felt like,
it boils down to this, and here's just on a very plain, simple man, like the way I write about this is boil down to whether it's Trump or the flag or a lot of these things. The reply, the argument that comes back to me time and time again is, you didn't live through the oppression. You did not live through that time period. You will never understand it. Trump stands for going up against China and going up against the
mhm.
the oppressive regimes that are still in. Now, how do we know if this is a reality in the current world today? China and this sort of like oppression comes in the wave to the United States and becomes a reality here. That is a question that lingers in the back of my mind because they experienced it. They're passing on the trauma of that sort of that scarcity almost, view.
But it's still kind of exactly, but it's still living in
Yeah.
scarcity. And
Yeah.
I think that one thing I'm very proud to that I observe is with our what I've observed from some of the other our other Southeast Asian brothers and
Counterparts.
sisters over
Mm-hmm.
there, counterparts, and is that the Vietnamese as a community, we have from our professional growth and our impact in the business world and professional world, we at here in the US, we we've gotten into a lot of amazing things, man. You know what I mean? So I feel that that's something. If we live from we can start shifting our viewpoint, shifting from that scarcity to abundance perspective, because especially here in the Orange County, Houston, San Jose area, there are people that there's a large middle class, there's a large elite class, and we did that because we're amazing. We're relentless. We're great people, man. So I feel like what else are we? Why are we holding on? Why do we continue to keep on living in the past? Right? It's respecting the past, but we we can't continue to
Well, that
live in the
fear
past.
lives
But
on in the previous generation, and I understand it. The fear and the pain. I mean, the pain is huge because they lost lives and they
no,
lost
the pain is
property.
real,
They
and
lost a
agreed,
lot
and
of stuff.
that's for that reason. That's why I said earlier,
Yeah.
way earlier, it was that if we actually knew, instead of kind of like coddling our feelings and go like, we knew that all this stuff was that freaking hard, you know, I think even I would have been my journey as a Vietnamese man, discovering my identity would be a lot sooner. I probably would be like, I would be so heartbroken, or I'll be so like, so thankful. Maybe my viewpoint would be, I'm so thankful that you went through all that. Let me do what I can to preserve our culture, to inspire this next generation, um, to keep this, keep growing our culture. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm doing that now in my 30s, but maybe that would have shifted my
Yeah,
motivation earlier.
and 20, 30 years from now downstream, you're going to see the product of that kind of belief that you have.
Hmm.
That's probably what the Koreans are experiencing worldwide. That sort of belief that there was a Johnny Nguyen
That's right.
30 years ago with that same attitude that you have right now, that's doing their Viet Q Media form 30 years ago. And now look at the seeds that they've planted. They've become these like massive oak trees in the world of media and entertainment and representation, and people who are not Korean want to learn the Korean language. So I think we have a lot of work to do, and I want to I want to tell you how proud I am of your work and how much I
Thank
look
you.
forward to having you back on the show many, many more times so we can have these kind of discussions and work in conjunction with each other because we're in the same space and we are here to amplify the people around us, and we are here to really push up and bring up our fellow Vietnamese people.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of echo that, my 100% intention in this, it's not money motivated in terms of why I got back into media. I went on a hiatus from media to be an entrepreneur, and was successful there. But my intention is very clear. I want to see us heal. I want to unify,
Mm-hmm.
and I I I I was told from a great mentor, let's. I don't want to use terms like VQs or local Vietnamese and things like that. I want to just use one identifier, Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's great.
when we get to that level, and the only reason why I put people in categories currently is because that's the only way to describe people's intentions. Like VQs, we're still trying to find our identity, and even there's subcategories within that: VQ Americans, VQ, Canadians, VQ Europeans, as I mentioned earlier. So all these identities are still, we're they're all special in its own way, and I find that there's never going to be two stories that are going to be alike, but we share. But what we do share in common is that some of the hard stuff. It's when it comes to the what our viewpoints on the flag is always never spoken about because people are afraid of the backlash. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, and we have to navigate it carefully and with empathy and compassion, and that's hard to do because we're not programmed that way. I think just on a genetic human level, we're just it's hard to be that way and
it's
be
hard,
empathetic.
but I'm stepping into it in
Yeah,
terms of, and I want to make it very clear. For me, what I'm afraid of is because I'm in, I want access. I want to be able to have people open up to me. That's the reason why sometimes I can't go directly to it, or you know what I mean.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um,
I feel
but
you in
the
that.
the more we're able to at least even scratch the surface or even bring it up and have these conversations, um, the better. So I feel, for this older generation, I'm speaking to you directly. I can never fathom what you guys went through at all. But all I can do is be a sounding board for you to share your stories, and we want to respect your stories, and
And honor
because
it too.
and honor it.
And
You know,
honor the stories and never forget. But we also have to move on, but not
but we have
forget.
to. But
Yeah,
you,
we have.
we have to move on. So my message is of love and is of unity.
Yeah,
And one day I hope in 2030 or 2040, however long this takes, or I'm here on Earth, um, we could, you know, no longer kind of identify geographically who we are as a group. We are just going to be the Vietnamese nationality,
yeah.
and united under united under that.
Well, Johnny, I want to thank you for today. It was a wonderful, refreshing conversation, and we touched on stuff um, that I did not plan on talking about, especially the idea of the flag and who we're cheering for in the World Cup in 2022. These are
It's
wonderful
gonna
things.
happen, man. So I
Yeah,
mean,
we're
it's
putting it out there.
inevitable. It's a phenomenal team, and I really, and I've been to the bars when the guys are playing, and it's
Yeah.
like, what are we gonna do, guys?
Well, we're gonna cheer. We're gonna cheer for the
We're
Vietnamese
cheering.
people. We're gonna figure this out, and you'll come back on, and we'll talk more about the hopefully when the team coalesces and gets better formed, we come back and we can have a discussion because I really want to get into the details of that soccer team because I don't know much about it. It sounds like you do. You know a lot about it, and hopefully in a few more months, maybe at the beginning of the next year or something, specifically for that World Cup or for the soccer team 2022, we can get back and have a discussion. But hopefully I'll have you back on before that to talk about more music and other media projects.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, there's gonna be cultural events, and also different media uh, projects that I'm gonna be that I feel is gonna keep inching our way in terms of representation and just great stories to share.
Yeah, awesome, Johnny. Thank you so much again. And we will talk to you soon.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. The Vietnamese is produced by Brittany Tran and Javier Proenza. Special thanks to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube where you can subscribe, like, and comment. Please rate and give us a review wherever you find our podcasts. Thanks again for listening.